The envelope sat on my kitchen table like a snake coiled to strike. Divorce papers, final, binding. The end of everything I believed in, everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for. And attached to them, a post-it note in his familiar handwriting. I need space to find myself. You'll be fine. Marcus. You'll be fine. 3 words that would haunt me for months. 3 words that dismissed 7 years of marriage, dismissed our struggles, dismissed me like I was an inconvenience rather than his wife, like I was a chapter he was tired of reading, rather than the woman who'd stood by him through everything. I was 31 years old, and my husband had just walked out on me. Not for another woman, at least not that I knew of then, not because of some dramatic fight or irreconcilable difference. He left because he was unfulfilled, because he needed to discover his purpose, because staying with me in our small apartment, working his regular job, living our regular life, wasn't enough for him anymore. I remember sitting at that table, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold the papers steady enough to read them. I remember the sound of my own breathing, ragged and desperate, like I was drowning in air. I remember thinking, this isn't real. This can't be real. We just talked about starting a family last month. But it was real. The papers were real. The empty closet where his clothes used to hang was real. The silence in our apartment that I'd now have to afford alone, was devastatingly, crushingly real. I called him. Of course I called him. 47 times that first day, according to my phone log. He answered exactly once. Marcus, please, I begged. And I wasn't ashamed of begging then. I would have gotten on my knees if he'd been standing in front of me. Please, let's talk about this. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. We can go to counseling. We can... Janae, it's not about fixing anything, he'd said, his voice tired like I was exhausting him. Like my pain was an inconvenience to his journey of self-discovery. It's about me needing to figure out who I am without being defined by this relationship. I'm 33 years old and I've never lived alone, never traveled, never taken risks. I feel like I'm disappearing. But I'm your wife, I'd whispered, tears streaming down my face. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, he'd said. That's why I have to do this now, before I resent you for the life I didn't live. And then he'd hung up. Just like that, like he was canceling a subscription, not abandoning his marriage. The next few weeks were a blur of humiliation and devastation. I had to tell my family. My mother, who'd warned me he wasn't ready for marriage. My father, who'd given him a chance anyway. My sister, who'd been my maid of honor and cried happy tears at our wedding. I had to tell our friends, watch them choose sides, feel the pity in their eyes when they looked at me. I had to tell my boss why I couldn't focus at work, why I was crying in the bathroom between client calls, why my performance was slipping when I'd always been their top account manager. But worst of all, I had to tell myself that I wasn't enough. That's what it felt like. That I, Janae Michelle Williams, with my college degree and my good job and my loyalty and my love, wasn't enough to make my husband want to stay. The practical realities hit fast and hard. Our apartment rent was $2,400 a month. My salary alone could cover it, but just barely. That left almost nothing for food, utilities, car payment, student loans, credit card bills we'd accumulated together. Marcus had promised to help with expenses until I got on my feet. Another phrase that made me want to scream. But his checks were sporadic at best. $500 one month, nothing the next. $200 the month after that. I found out through mutual friends that he'd moved to Colorado. Living in some mountain town, working at a ski resort, finding himself on the slopes while I was rationing groceries and choosing between paying the electric bill or filling my gas tank. I lost 15 pounds in 2 months, not in a healthy way, in a too depressed to eat way, in a choosing between food and keeping the lights on, in a crying myself to sleep on an empty stomach way. My friends tried to help. They really did. My best friend Tasha brought me groceries and wouldn't let me refuse. My cousin Nicole let me borrow money for rent when Marcus's check didn't come. My mother showed up with containers of food, and that look in her eyes that said, "I told you so," without saying it out loud, which somehow made it worse. But the worst part wasn't the money. It wasn't even the loneliness, though God knows I felt lonely in a way I'd never experienced before. The worst part was the shame. The shame of being a Black woman whose husband left her. The shame of having to explain at family gatherings why I was there alone. The shame of seeing couples everywhere, at restaurants, in parks, in grocery stores, and feeling like I had abandoned wife tattooed on my forehead. The shame of my mother's church friends whispering, probably wondering what I'd done to drive him away. Did I not cook enough? Was I not supportive enough? Did I let myself go? Was I too demanding, too independent, too much or not enough of something? I started having panic attacks, real ones, where my chest would tighten and my vision would blur, and I'd have to sit down wherever I was, in my car, at my desk, in the produce section of Trader Joe's, and just breathe until it passed. I went to therapy, not because I wanted to, but because my boss gently suggested it after I broke down during a team meeting. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, helped me see that I was grieving. Not just the marriage, but the future I'd envisioned. The children we'd planned to have. The house we'd been saving for. The life we'd promised each other. "You're mourning a death," she told me. "The death of your marriage, yes, but also the death of who you thought you were and who you thought he was." She was right. I'd thought I was the kind of woman whose husband didn't leave. I'd thought Marcus was the kind of man who kept his vows. I'd thought we were building something permanent. I'd thought wrong. 6 months after he left, I saw photos on Facebook. Marcus tanned and grinning on top of a mountain. Marcus at a bonfire with new friends. Marcus looking happy and free, and like abandoning his wife was the best decision he'd ever made. I deactivated all my social media that night. 8 months after he left, I had to move out of our apartment. I couldn't afford it anymore, not without going into serious debt. I moved into a studio, a tiny, depressing studio with thin walls and a bathroom so small I could barely turn around, in a neighborhood that made my mother nervous when she visited. I packed up 7 years of marriage into boxes, our wedding photos, his books that he'd left behind, furniture we'd picked out together, kitchen items we'd received as wedding gifts. All of it either sold, donated, or shoved into a storage unit I could barely afford. I remember sitting on the floor of that empty apartment on my last night there, surrounded by boxes and memories, and just screaming, just letting out this primal, guttural scream that came from somewhere deep inside me, from the part of me that was broken and angry and so tired of being strong. No one came to check on me. The neighbors probably heard me and didn't care. Or maybe they were used to sounds of suffering in a building where people were barely holding on. That was my rock bottom. 31 years old, divorced, living in a studio apartment that smelled like the previous tenant's cigarette smoke, working a job I was failing at because I couldn't focus, with a bank account that never had more than a few $100s in it, and a heart that felt like it had been fed through a shredder. I thought about giving up. I really did. Not in a permanent way, but in a, maybe I should just move back home with my parents way. In a maybe I'm not strong enough to do this alone way. In a maybe Marcus was right to leave because I'm clearly not capable of being enough way. But then something happened, something small but significant. I was at work, barely functioning, when my boss called me into her office. I thought I was being fired. I'd been preparing for it, honestly. My performance had been terrible. I was late frequently. I'd lost 3 major clients in 2 months. But instead, she said, "Janae, I need to know if you're committed to staying here. Because if you are, I want to invest in you. I want to send you to that leadership training program you applied for 2 years ago. I want to promote you to senior account manager. but I need to know that you're present, that you're here, that you're ready to show up for yourself. I opened my mouth to make excuses, to explain about Marcus and the divorce and how hard everything was. But then I stopped. Because I realized she wasn't asking about my circumstances. She was asking about my choice. Was I going to let what Marcus did define the rest of my life? Was I going to stay broken? Was I going to prove everyone right who'd pitied me and whispered about me and wondered what I'd done to deserve this? Or was I going to show up for myself the way I'd shown up for Marcus for 7 years? I'm committed, I heard myself say. I'm here. I'm ready. And that was the moment everything began to change. Not immediately, not magically, but that was the moment I stopped waiting for Marcus to come back and fix what he'd broken. That was the moment I stopped being the woman he'd left behind and started becoming the woman I needed to be. That was the moment I decided that surviving wasn't enough anymore. I was going to thrive, not for him, not to show him, not for revenge or vindication or to prove anything to anyone, but for me. For the woman who'd been abandoned and humiliated and broken down to nothing. I was going to rise from these ashes, and when I did, I'd be unrecognizable from the woman Marcus had thrown away. I just had no idea how high I would climb, or how drastically he would fall, or that in exactly 5 years, he'd show up at my door with nothing, expecting everything, and finally understand the magnitude of the mistake he'd made. But that's a story for later. First, I had to become the woman who could tell that story. First, I had to save myself. The leadership training program started 3 weeks later, and I showed up on the first day looking like someone who had her life together. Professional blazer, hair freshly done, makeup covering the dark circles under my eyes from another sleepless night in my depressing studio apartment. Fake it till you make it, they say. So I faked it. The program was intense, 8 weeks of workshops, seminars, and team-building exercises designed to identify and develop the company's future leaders. 20 people had been selected from different departments across the organization. I was the only one from my division, the only Black woman in the cohort, and probably the only one fighting back panic attacks in bathroom stalls between sessions. But I showed up. Every single day, I showed up. The first week, we had to present our 5-year vision for our careers. I watched my colleagues talk about corner offices and executive titles and 6-figure salaries with the confidence of people who'd never had their entire world collapse around them. When it was my turn, I stood up and my hands were shaking. I thought about lying, about presenting some polished version of myself that didn't include the truth of where I'd been 6 months ago. Instead, I told the truth. A year ago, I thought I knew exactly where I'd be in 5 years, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I thought I'd be buying a house with my husband, starting a family, building the life we'd planned together. But my husband left me 8 months ago, and those 5 years, they don't exist anymore. I could feel the discomfort in the room. People shifted in their seats. This wasn't the kind of vulnerability corporate leadership training was supposed to include. So here's my new 5-year vision. I continued. I'm going to become so skilled, so valuable, and so successful that I never have to depend on anyone else for my security again. I'm going to build a life that no one can walk away from and leave me with nothing. Because I'm done being vulnerable. I'm done being left behind. And I'm done letting other people's choices determine my worth. When I sat down, the room was silent. Then our instructor, a woman named Margaret, who'd been a VP at 3 Fortune 500 companies, started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. Others joined in. After the session, Margaret pulled me aside. That, she said, pointing at me, was the most honest thing I've heard in 15 years of running these programs. Most people come in here performing. You came in here real. Don't lose that. I didn't lose it. I leaned into it. Over the next 8 weeks, I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I stayed late every night, reading the assigned materials, practicing my presentations, networking with the other participants. I volunteered for every extra project, raised my hand for every opportunity, and pushed myself beyond what I thought I was capable of. At night, I'd go home to my tiny studio apartment and eat ramen noodles while studying case studies and industry reports. I'd fall asleep with my laptop still open, wake up at 5 a.m., and do it all over again. My bank account was still depressingly low. I was still choosing between groceries and gas money. I was still wearing the same 3 professional outfits, rotated throughout the week because I couldn't afford new clothes. But something was changing inside me. A fire was building, a determination that felt almost violent in its intensity. Marcus had left me because he needed to find himself. Fine. I'd find myself too. And the woman I'd find would be someone he never imagined I could become. The leadership program ended with final presentations to the company's executive team. We each had to pitch a strategic initiative that could transform our department. I'd been working on mine for weeks, barely sleeping, refining every detail until it was perfect. My pitch was for a complete overhaul of our client retention strategy. I'd analyzed 5 years of data, identified patterns in client churn, and developed a predictive model that could flag at-risk accounts before we lost them. I'd created a 3-tier intervention system, projected revenue impact, and outlined implementation costs and timelines. I presented for 30 minutes to a room full of VPs and C-suite executives, including our CEO. My voice didn't shake once. I answered every question with confidence backed by data. I was professional, polished, and powerful. When I finished, the CFO leaned forward and said, "When can you start implementing this?" 2 weeks later, I was promoted to senior account manager with a 35% salary increase and a mandate to execute my retention strategy. More importantly, I'd been noticed. Really noticed. Not as the woman whose husband left her, but as the woman who had innovative ideas and the skills to execute them. The extra money meant I could finally breathe. I paid off my credit card debt. I moved out of the studio from hell into a decent 1-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. I bought groceries without checking my bank balance first. Small victories, but they felt enormous. But I didn't stop there. I couldn't stop there. The hunger in me had been awakened, and it demanded more. I started taking online courses at night. Digital marketing, data analytics, project management. I got certified in Salesforce and became an expert in our CRM system. I made myself indispensable, the person everyone came to when they needed something done right. My retention strategy worked. In the first quarter, we reduced client churn by 23%. Revenue from existing accounts increased by $2.3 million. I presented the results to the board of directors, and suddenly, I wasn't just noticed, I was valued. A year after Marcus left, I was promoted again. Account director, another substantial raise, a team of 5 people reporting to me, an office with a window, business cards with my name and impressive title. I started dressing better. Not just professional, but powerful. I invested in quality pieces, tailored blazers, designer heels, statement jewelry. I got my hair done every 2 weeks at a nice salon instead of doing it myself in my bathroom. I started working out, not to lose weight, but to feel strong. I joined professional organizations and started networking intentionally. I went to industry conferences and collected business cards. I pitched articles to trade publications and got published. I built a LinkedIn profile that attracted recruiters. My therapist, Dr. Chen, watched my transformation with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're doing amazingly well," she said during one session, "but make sure you're healing, not just achieving. Make sure you're processing the pain, not just outrunning it." I heard her, I did. But honestly, achievement felt better than grief. Success felt better than sadness. Building something felt better than crying over what I'd lost. 2 years after Marcus left, a headhunter reached out about a VP position at a competitor. The salary was almost double what I was making. I interviewed on a whim, not expecting to get it. They offered me the job. Vice President of Client Strategy, $185,000 base salary plus bonuses, full benefits, stock options, a corner office, a team of 20. I was 33 years old, the same age Marcus had been when he'd left to find himself, and I was becoming an executive. I accepted the offer and gave my notice. My current company countered with a promotion to director level, but it wasn't enough. I'd outgrown them. I was ready for more. On my first day as a VP, I sat in my corner office overlooking the city and let myself feel it. The pride, the accomplishment, the absolute certainty that I'd earned this, not despite what Marcus had done to me, but because of what I'd done for myself in response. I took a photo of the view from my window and almost posted it on social media. Almost. But I'd learned something in those 2 years. Success isn't about showing off. It's about knowing your own worth, whether anyone else sees it or not. Besides, I was still afraid. Afraid that if I put myself out there, I'd somehow draw Marcus's attention, that he'd see what I'd become and want back into my life. Or worse, that he'd see what I'd become and still not care. I wasn't ready for either possibility, so I kept my head down and kept building. I excelled in my new role. Within 6 months, I'd reorganized my entire department, implemented new systems, and increased client retention by 31%. I was invited to speak at conferences. Industry publications interviewed me. I was becoming known, not as someone's ex-wife, but as someone in my own right. 3 years after Marcus left, I bought a house. Not a small starter home, but a real house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, hardwood floors, a backyard with a garden, in a good neighborhood where I felt safe walking at night. I signed the papers alone, toured the house alone, got the keys alone. And when I walked into my empty house for the first time as the sole owner, I sat on the floor in the living room and cried. But this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of pride, of accomplishment, of understanding that I'd done it. I'd built a life, by myself, for myself. I furnished the house slowly, intentionally. Every piece was chosen by me, paid for by me, arranged by me. No compromises. No, what do you think, to someone who wasn't there. Just my taste, my style, my choices. I hung art on the walls. Original pieces from Black artists I discovered at local galleries. I planted roses in the backyard. I painted the guest bedroom a bold turquoise that Marcus would have hated, but I loved. I made it mine. I started dating occasionally. Nothing serious. I wasn't ready for serious. But I went to dinners, had conversations, remembered what it felt like to be valued by someone. To have a man open doors and pay for meals and call when he said he would. I realized, slowly, that what Marcus had done, leaving me, had nothing to do with my worth, and everything to do with his inability to appreciate what he had. 4 years after Marcus left, I was promoted again. Senior Vice President, $275,000 salary, profit sharing, a team of 50, a seat at the executive table at 35 years old. I was one of the youngest SVPs in the company's history, and one of only 3 Black women at that level. I bought a new car, a sleek BMW that I paid for in cash. I started traveling. Paris, Tokyo, Bali, all the places Marcus had said we'd go someday. I went alone or with friends, and I discovered I loved traveling without having to compromise on itineraries or budgets. I invested in real estate and bought a rental property. I maxed out my 401k and opened investment accounts. I hired a financial advisor and started building real wealth. My mother stopped looking at me with pity and started looking at me with awe. "I don't know how you did it," she said one day over lunch. How you took something so devastating and turned it into this. I didn't have a choice, I told her honestly. It was build a new life or let his choices destroy me. And I decided I'm too valuable to be destroyed by someone else's decisions. My sister threw me a divorce anniversary party on the 5th anniversary of my divorce being finalized. All my friends came. We drank champagne and celebrated not the end of my marriage, but the beginning of my evolution. 5 years ago, you were broken, Tasha said, raising her glass. Today, you're the most powerful woman I know. To Janae, who rose from the ashes and became fire. We toasted. We laughed. We danced in my living room, in my house that I owned, that I'd bought with money I'd earned, in the life I'd built. And I realized something profound. I was happy. Genuinely, deeply, authentically happy. Not in a I've moved on from my pain way, but in a I've built something beautiful from my pain way. It stopped defining myself by what Marcus had done to me and started defining myself by what I'd done for myself. I was successful. I was financially secure. I was respected in my industry. I was strong. I was whole. I was enough. I'd always been enough. Marcus had left me with nothing, and from that nothing, I'd built everything. I thought I was done with the past. I thought that chapter was closed, sealed, buried under 5 years of achievement and growth and transformation. I had no idea that the past was about to knock on my door. Literally. It was a Saturday morning in late September, 5 years and 3 months after Marcus had walked out of my life. I was in my kitchen, still in my silk pajamas, drinking French press coffee and reading the Wall Street Journal on my iPad. Classical music played softly from my Sonos speakers. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the fresh flowers I'd bought myself from the farmer's market the day before. This was my routine now. Leisurely Saturday mornings. Peace, contentment, a life built on my own terms. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My assistant had scheduled a massage for later that afternoon, but that wasn't for hours. I set down my coffee, tightened the belt on my silk robe, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man, thin, hunched, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. Then he looked up toward the door, and my heart stopped. Marcus. But not the Marcus I remembered. Not the confident, healthy man who'd left me to find himself in Colorado. This Marcus looked like he'd been found by life and beaten down by it. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, his shoulders curved inward like he was trying to make himself smaller. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it, to pretend I wasn't home. To call security? Yes, my neighborhood had security now, because I lived in that kind of neighborhood. But curiosity won. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe after 5 years of wondering, of occasional late-night Google searches to see what he was up to, of imagining this moment, maybe I needed to see him face to face to finally close that chapter completely. I opened the door but left the security screen closed between us. Janae, he breathed, and his voice cracked on my name. Thank God. I wasn't sure you still lived here. I wasn't sure you'd... I'm so glad I found you. Marcus, my voice was flat, emotionless. What are you doing here? I did... He looked down at his feet. His shoes were worn through at the toes. I needed to see you. To talk to you. Can I come in, please? No. The word came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. This man had destroyed me. He didn't get to come into my sanctuary, into the home I'd built from the rubble of what he'd left behind. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Okay, I understand. Can we at least talk? Out here? I looked at him, really looked at him. The Marcus I'd married had been vibrant, healthy, full of restless energy. This Marcus looked defeated, sick even, His skin had a grayish tint. His clothes hung off his frame. There were scars on his hands I didn't remember. Against my better judgment, I said, "Wait here." I closed the door, went to my bedroom, and threw on jeans and a cashmere sweater. I caught my reflection in the mirror. Hair natural and healthy. Skin glowing, body toned from my regular gym sessions and yoga classes. I looked good. Better than good. I looked like success. I grabbed my phone and keys. No way was I staying here for this conversation. And went back outside. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from here," I said, not looking at him as I locked my door. "We can talk there." I don't have any money for coffee," he said quietly. I stopped, turned to look at him. "What?" I'm broke, Janae. Completely broke. I lost everything." Something cold settled in my chest. "Then you can watch me drink coffee while you explain what you're doing on my doorstep after 5 years of silence." The walk to the coffee shop was excruciating. Marcus tried to make small talk, commenting on the neighborhood, mentioning how nice the area was, asking if I'd lived here long. I didn't respond. I just walked, very aware of the contrast we made. Me in my $200 jeans and designer sunglasses. Him in clothes that looked like they came from a donation bin. At the coffee shop, a trendy place with exposed brick and artisanal everything, I ordered my usual oat milk latte. Marcus stood beside me, silent, not ordering anything. The barista looked between us uncertainly. "Just the one drink," I said firmly. We sat at a corner table. I sipped my latte. Marcus sat with his hands folded on the table, and I could see them shaking. "So," I said finally. "Talk." He took a breath. "I know I have no right to be here. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "I don't need the preamble. I don't need the apology you've rehearsed. Just tell me what you want, Marcus. Why are you here?" His face crumpled slightly. "Things didn't work out the way I thought they would. In Colorado. The finding myself thing." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out what I found was a series of really bad decisions. That's not my problem." I know it's not. But Janae, I'm in trouble. Real trouble. I lost my job 8 months ago. I've been couch surfing, staying with friends, but I've run out of friends willing to help. I'm homeless, Janae. I've been sleeping in my car for the last 2 weeks, and the car is about to be repossessed because I can't make the payments." I took another sip of my latte, felt nothing. Again, not my problem. I'm sick. I found out 6 months ago. I have diabetes, type 2. I haven't been managing it well because I can't afford the medication or the doctor visits. And I think there might be something else wrong too, but I can't afford to find out what. He looked at me with those hollow eyes, waiting for sympathy, for the woman he'd married to emerge, the woman who would have immediately started problem solving, who would have opened her wallet and her heart. That woman was dead. He'd killed her 5 years ago. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked calmly. "Because." He reached across the table like he was going to take my hand. I pulled back. He withdrew, looking hurt. "Because you're the only person who might understand, who might help. We were married, Janae. We took vows, for better or worse." A laugh escaped me, short, sharp, humorless. "For better or worse. That's rich, Marcus. Really rich. Where were those vows when you left me? When you decided marriage was interfering with your journey of self-discovery." I made a mistake. A mistake. I leaned forward and I felt the anger I'd worked so hard to process in therapy bubbling up. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is being late for dinner. Walking out on your wife with a post-it note saying you'll be fine isn't a mistake. It's a choice. A deliberate, selfish choice. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I've regretted it every day since. Have you? I tilted my head, studying him. Because, from what I saw on social media before I blocked you, you looked pretty happy. Mountain adventures, new friends, living your best life while I was eating ramen in a studio apartment that smelled like cigarettes because it was all I could afford after you left. Shame washed over his face. I was performing, trying to convince myself I'd made the right choice. Trying to prove to everyone that I was happy, that leaving was the right decision. But I wasn't happy, Janae. I was miserable. I just didn't want to admit I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. And now you want what? Forgiveness? A place to stay? Money? He looked down. I thought maybe we could talk. Really talk. About what happened. About us. About whether there might be a chance. Stop, I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Several people looked over. I didn't care. Let me make something very clear to you, Marcus. There is no us. There hasn't been an us for 5 years. You made sure of that when you walked out. But we had something real. We had something real, I agreed. And you threw it away. You don't get to come back now that your grand adventure failed and expect me to pick up the pieces. I'm not expecting that, he said desperately, standing too. I'm just asking for help. Temporary help. Just until I get back on my feet. Alone, maybe. Or a place to stay for a few weeks while I figure things out. I'll pay you back, I swear. The audacity, the sheer audacity of this man. You want money? I asked softly, dangerously. You want me to help you get back on your feet? Hope flashed across his face. Yes, yes, if you could. Where was your help when I needed it? My voice was rising now, and I didn't care who heard. Where were you when I was working 60-hour weeks trying to keep our apartment? Where were you when I was choosing between food and gas money? Where were you when I was having panic attacks in parking lots because I didn't know how I was going to survive? Janae, you want to know what I've been doing for the last 5 years, Marcus? While you were finding yourself, I pulled out my phone and pulled up my LinkedIn profile. I shoved it toward him. Read it. Read what I've accomplished. He took the phone with shaking hands. I watched his eyes scan the screen, watched them widen as he took in my title, my company, the articles I'd written, the speaking engagements, the awards. You're a senior vice president, he whispered. Yes. You make... He was looking at a salary survey article someone had posted that estimated SVP compensation at my company. More in a year than you made in 3 when we were married, I finished. I own my home. I own rental property. I have investments, retirement accounts, savings. I went from nothing, from the nothing you left me with, to building a life most people only dream about. I took my phone back, and I did it without you. Actually, no, I did it because of you. Because you leaving forced me to become stronger than I ever thought I could be. You did me a favor, Marcus. Simply. Tears were running down his face now. I'm so proud of you, he choked out. You're amazing. You always were. I just couldn't see it. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare try to take any credit for this. Don't you dare act proud. You don't get to be proud of what I built from the ashes of what you burned down. I know I don't. But Janae, please, I'm desperate. I have nowhere else to turn. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm not asking for a relationship. I'm just asking for basic human compassion. Help me get medical care. Help me get back on my feet. Please, I'm begging you. And he was, actually begging. This man who'd once been my husband, who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my life, was standing in a coffee shop begging me for help. 5 years ago, I would have helped. 5 years ago, I would have opened my wallet and my home. 5 years ago, his suffering would have destroyed me. But I wasn't that woman anymore. No, I said simply. Please. No, Marcus. I'm not going to help you. Not with money, not with housing, not with anything. You made your choice 5 years ago. These are the consequences. But I'm sick. I'm homeless. I'm... And I was broken. I was abandoned. I was financially devastated. Did you care? Did you come back to check on me? Did you send more than sporadic checks that barely covered a fraction of what you owed? I picked up my latte, almost empty now. You left me when things got hard for you. Now things are hard for you again, and you expect me to be your safety net. That's not how this works. I made a mistake. Yes, you did, and you get to live with it. That's called being an adult. That's called taking responsibility for your choices. I started walking toward the door. He followed me. Janae, wait, please, just listen. If you won't help me financially, at least hear me out. Give me advice. Tell me how you did it, how you rebuilt. I'm trying to do the same thing. I stopped at the door and turned to face him. People were definitely staring now, but I was beyond caring. You want to know how I did it? I asked. I stopped waiting for someone else to save me. I stopped making excuses. I stopped feeling sorry for myself, and I worked. I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life. I sacrificed. I struggled. I cried myself to sleep and woke up and did it again, the next day and the day after that. I didn't take shortcuts. I didn't expect anyone to fix my problems. I fixed them myself. I pushed open the door. The fall air was crisp, clean. That's my advice, Marcus. Save yourself. Because I'm not going to do it for you. But we're connected, he called after me. We have history. We loved each other. I turned back one last time. We did love each other. Past tense. You killed that love when you left, and you can't resurrect something you murdered. Do you hate me? He asked, his voice breaking. Is that it? You hate me so much you'll just let me suffer? No, I said honestly. I don't hate you. I don't feel anything for you. And that's worse, isn't it? You're hoping for hatred because at least that would mean you still matter to me. But you don't, Marcus. You're just a stranger who hurt me once. I've moved on. I've healed. I've built a beautiful life, and you're not part of it. Janae, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could go back. But you can't. That's the thing about choices, Marcus. They're permanent. You chose to leave. I chose to survive. Now we both get to live with those choices. I started walking back toward my house, my beautiful house, my sanctuary, the physical manifestation of everything I'd overcome. Period. Wait, he called, desperation clear in his voice. At least tell me, are you seeing anyone? Are you happy? I almost didn't answer, almost just kept walking. But something made me turn around one more time. Yes, I said. I'm seeing someone. His name is James. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon. He's kind, successful. And he treats me like I'm precious, like I'm valuable, like leaving me would be the stupidest thing he could possibly do. I watched that land on Marcus like a physical blow. And am I happy? I continued. I'm happier than I've ever been. I wake up in my beautiful home that I own. I go to a job where I'm respected and valued. I have friends who support me and family who's proud of me. I travel. I invest. I plan for a future that's entirely in my control. So yes, Marcus, I'm incredibly happy. And none of that happiness includes you. I'm glad, he said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. I'm glad you're happy. You deserve it. You always did. I wish I could have been the man who made you happy, instead of the man who broke you. You couldn't have been, I said quietly, because the woman I am now, the happy, successful, powerful woman, she only exists because you broke me. I had to break to rebuild myself stronger. So in a twisted way, I guess I should thank you. Don't, he said, wiping his eyes. Don't thank me for hurting you. I'm not. I'm thanking myself for surviving you. I turned and walked away. This time he didn't follow, didn't call after me, just stood there outside the coffee shop. A broken man who'd gambled on finding something better and lost everything. I walked the 2 blocks back to my house with my head high. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt calm, clear, complete. When I got home, I locked the door behind me, leaned against it, and took a deep breath. He'd come back. After 5 years, he'd come back, broken and desperate and expecting me to fix him. And I'd sent him away. I'd chosen myself. 5 years ago, that would have been impossible. 5 years ago, I would have helped him, hurt myself to ease his pain, set myself on fire to keep him warm. But I'd learned something in those 5 years. You can't save people who don't want to save themselves. And you can't pour from an empty cup. Marcus had drained me dry when he left. I'd spent 5 years filling myself back up, and I wasn't going to let him drain me again. My phone buzzed. A text from James. "Still on for dinner tonight? Can't wait to see you." I smiled, texted back, "Absolutely. I have a story to tell you." Another text came through, this time from an unknown number. "This is Marcus. I got your number from your sister. I'm sorry for showing up like that. I'm sorry for everything. I understand if you never want to hear from me again. But if you change your mind, if you ever want to talk, I'll be here. I'll always love you, Janae, even if you don't believe it." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I blocked the number. I wouldn't change my mind. I wouldn't talk to him again. I wouldn't let him back into my life in any capacity. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. Some bridges should stay burned. Marcus had walked across our bridge 5 years ago and set it on fire behind him, leaving me stranded on the other side. I'd built my own bridge out of my pain, my work, my determination. A better bridge, a stronger bridge, one that led to a future he'd never be part of. And that was exactly how it should be. I poured myself a glass of wine, a nice Pinot Noir from a vineyard I'd visited in Napa last spring, and walked out to my backyard. My roses were blooming, my garden was thriving. Everything I'd planted had taken root and grown, just like me. I thought about calling my therapist, Dr. Chen, to tell her about the encounter. She'd want to know. She'd want to make sure I was okay, that seeing him hadn't triggered old wounds. But I was okay, better than okay, because I'd faced the ghost of my past and sent him away without hesitation, without guilt, without regret. Marcus had come back expecting to find the woman he'd left, broken, dependent, willing to sacrifice herself for others even at her own expense. Instead, he'd found someone new, someone he'd inadvertently created by destroying the old me. He'd found a woman who knew her worth, a woman who'd built an empire from ashes, a woman who would never again let anyone make her feel less than she was. He'd found a woman who'd learned that the best revenge isn't cruelty or vindication. It's living well. It's becoming so successful, so happy, so completely whole that the person who broke you becomes irrelevant. It's closing the door on your past and walking into your future without looking back. That was my revenge. Not helping him, not hurting him, just existing in a space where he couldn't touch me anymore. I raised my glass to the sunset, to the journey I'd taken, to the woman I'd become. "Thank you, Marcus," I whispered to the evening air. "Thank you for leaving me. Because in losing you, I found myself." And I had. I'd found a woman I was proud to be. A woman I'd fought hard to become. A woman who would never again measure her worth by whether someone chose to stay or leave. My worth wasn't up for debate. It wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval or presence. I was enough. I'd always been enough. And Marcus, he was just a chapter in my story. A painful one, yes. A transformative one, absolutely. But still just a chapter. The rest of the book, that was mine to write. And it was going to be incredible. I went inside, locked the doors, and got ready for my date with James, with my future, with the life I'd earned. Marcus had shown up with nothing, expecting everything. And I'd shown him exactly what he'd lost. Me. The best thing he'd ever had and was too foolish to keep. That was all the revenge I needed.